Hey everybody, Ben Hansen and Brittany Barbieri. So it's Super Bowl Sunday weekend. I didn't watch any of it. I don't know if you did, Britt.
I did.
You did? Well,
Of
not
course.
only I'm not really a huge football fan, but um, more importantly, I was busy. I was busy because if you've been following the news, I was just about ready to take my Sunday nap, which I rarely get to do anymore. And all of a sudden my phone starts going off the hook. I've got my dad calling me. I've got news reporters that I work with calling me, and they're all like, "Have you been watching this? What's going on?" And if you've been living in the dark, well, I'm gonna give you a quick recap. But basically, since over a week ago, the Department of Defense, U.S. Department of Defense, the FAA, they're all coming out and talking about what first started. I think let me pull up the timeline here. This was Alaska before the first object was actually shot down. Over South Carolina. I believe it was first sighted a couple days earlier in Alaska, and this thing drifts down across the Midwest. That's where you get Montana. It was over some military installations. They closed down the airspace. They're tracking this thing. The president just says, like, we can't shoot it down because there's a lot of people below, and they let it drift all the way across the country to where it goes over the water in South Carolina, and they shoot this thing down, which we now know. I think we can confidently say that this was a Chinese spy balloon, even though they deny it was for spying. So then we have, throughout the week, three others. So we have four total objects. Now, the other ones at this point, it's debatable. We've had news reports saying that they are balloons, and then other DoD officials saying that information has not been verified. We are open to the possibility it might be something else. In summary, we had one that happened actually in Alaska, okay, on February 10th, and that was shot
Yep.
down, and the FBI is now analyzing that material. And then the next day, which was Saturday, you had one in Canada. It was over, I think, the
The
border,
board.
and it crosses over, and
Yep.
they shoot that thing down. And then just yesterday, okay, and we have this over Lake Huron
Yep.
in Michigan, and that was taken out. And so it's like crazy world, isn't it, Brittany? I mean, like right now, what is going on?
I know. I don't even know. The thing is you're trying to follow the reports, and the media is trying to catch up with the reports coming out, but they're really cross-referencing, and they're not. A lot of times, some of the media isn't making any sense. Like there's one report saying one thing, then there's another report saying another thing, and they're kind of
Yeah.
just deciphering what's. So basically, with the political balloon situation, they had no problem coming out and talking about it. No one's taking down videos in regards to the videos that were, shown, and everybody's so excited watching the balloon getting taken down and being shot down. But they are being extremely tight-lipped on these last three objects. The object in nature, they're basically, the shape is not even spherical. They're not even using that term or that word.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do have to pay attention to the key words. And so a lot of what was coming out of the press conference last night that was private, there were so many keyword players and components in that. And because they're being so tight-lipped, you can tell that the impressions from the media, they're their own impressions based off of what they're collectively hearing. They're not being given anything for the public. And I think at this point, it's kind of like we're all in this weird void. But the only thing that
Yeah.
I really like out of this out is the fact, kind of what Lou had mentioned in a tweet, was they're finally paying attention to the sky. It took them to see this balloon to pay attention to the sky and take this stuff seriously. Two of those objects were 20,000 feet and 40,000 feet. That is right dead center in our air traffic for our
Yep.
commerce. So this is an issue, but what are these objects and what are they doing? And
Yep.
why are they there?
No, so Lou Elizondo, yeah, you're talking about with the tweet there, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you for the insight. And the thing is, a lot of people obviously are going to be talking about this today. And our goal here for this video is not to necessarily rehash all of our, theories and such that we think could be. But I would say in defense, I guess, and giving credit to the government, I get it from their point of view because you have a very thirsty media and public who this is concerning, because the first thing we hear is that there's a Chinese spy balloon over us, and it's not so conspiratorial, not at all, to say that this could be a test run, that they could be flying something over for a future attack to say, detonate an EMP or release some type of contagion or something from high altitude. So that's not far-fetched at all. And so that's concerning that we not only didn't see this immediately or maybe assign the proper threat response to it, but now that the government knows that, they said they recalibrated their radars to try and see things such as balloons like this. And then all of a sudden, the other things are popping up. So again, not going to go too far into that, but I want to just preface what our topic is today with telling people, just like the government is not ruling out, they said they're not ruling out the ET hypothesis to, I'm paraphrasing because I wasn't in on this presser yesterday, the Pentagon. I was getting information from another source. At any rate,
right,
they're not ruling it out, but I'm telling you here now, people, we are not insinuating, implying that what we're about to show you and talk to you about is extraterrestrial or otherworldly. Not saying that. Okay. Everything is on the table, but as you will see, I believe, my personal opinion, what we're about to show you has a terrestrial origin. Terrestrial, meaning here on Earth, okay? Now, whether a foreign adversary made it, we made it, Black Project, I don't know. And as you know on our channel, we don't care. We honestly don't care about a lot of things. That's our new motto, we don't care. No, really, we do care. But what I'm trying to say is being curious is the important thing. And being curious, because this is anomalous in nature, I define that meaning it's out of your ordinary thing, and there's some weird stuff about this, and it's important we take it seriously, number one, because of aviation safety. Okay, so without further ado, we're not going to kind of rehash what happened here this weekend, except that it reminded me, and it reminded you, of something that took place a couple months ago. I was at a conference in Kentucky, and someone comes up to my table and tells me a story. This gentleman's name is Brent. We're not going to use his last name because he's asked us to keep him anonymous in the company that he works for, but he's a commercial pilot, and he was flying in 2019. The exact date was November 14th. Okay, so we're going to bring him on and talk with us because he witnessed and videoed. The video is not long, it's 11 seconds. Okay, so if you're looking to be entertained, I'm sorry if you see that as me being a little flippant here, but a lot of people tune in here because they want to see the greatest video of this, of that, and they want to see aliens and whatever. Okay, if you're here for that, you can just move on. This is important video though. Okay, because what it shows does appear, in my opinion, to look balloon-like, I say. What Brent's going to tell you is his opinion, probably that he doesn't think it was a balloon, and that's very possible too. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time analyzing it. We're just going to present it to you as information. I don't know if we're going to get any more info from this, because unless we have other witnesses, it is what it is. There's a video. There's his testimony, and it's something strange. Could it be related? The only hypothesis I'm going to present is we now know that the DoD has said there were other objects possibly during the Trump administration that they had possibly detected or that could have slipped through. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Brittany, but they're saying that they didn't have maybe the calibration set up to look for these things. And right. So it's possible this could have been happening, who knows, years ago. And here we have a case in 2019 that I think may be related. What do you say to that?
I 100% agree. I think when we discussed this, it was fascinating to me, especially what's been happening in the last week. I think this case lines up. And I think, honestly, people listening to this today just need to remember that this is an observer who was flying and saw this. I think we need to pay attention to what he states on behalf of this, and the rest is up to the viewers.
Precisely. So let's bring on Brent and let's hear about his event that took place in 2019. Hey, Brent, what's going on? Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Ben, how's it going?
Good, good. So we were just kind of like briefing people about, the whole background of what's been taking place this weekend, and a lot of press attention. Like, it's gone crazy. And that's why I felt like this was kind of timely to bring you on, because I know we spoke, it's been a couple months ago. And I've been so busy, I've wanted to get to your story, but now I'm like, oh my gosh, could this be related in any way? So can you take us back? First of all, tell people a little bit about, your experience. You're the captain for this airline. How long have you been flying for?
I've been about 36 years now.
36 years. Let's see.
Yeah.
I almost have you beat. Almost. Because I started when I was 12 years old, which would have been, oh gosh, I'm dating myself here, but it would have been like 28, 30 years ago, something like that. Anyways, 32 years ago, 32. Okay, so I'm only behind you a couple of years. But
Okay.
that's awesome. And you have thousands of hours of more experience than I do.
Yeah, I've got about 20,000 hours now flying.
20,000 hours. And has it been mostly commercial, freight? Did you do anything else, instructing or military, anything like that?
Yeah, I did instructing in the LA Basin for about 1,800 hours. Back in the early 90s, it was hard to get a job, so I did instruct for a long time before any opportunities kind of presented themselves. But most of it after that has been all commercial flying.
That's awesome. So can you tell us what equipment you were flying this day? Now, this was November 14th, 2019, right? So
That's correct. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. We're coming out of Dallas to Louisville, Kentucky. We're in an MD-11. And let's see, it was a beautiful day. It was actually very, very clear. I think when you get to the video, you're going to see it was both above us and below us. It was a beautiful morning. And I guess the whole thing really started when, I guess it was Indianapolis Center called out us, and they called it out at 12 o'clock and about 1,000 feet above us. So at that point, I looked up and I saw something glint on the horizon. I'm like, oh, that's our traffic. So we went back down and we were briefing our approach in Louisville. And about 45 seconds later is when something came for our 11 o'clock right over top of us. So I immediately noticed that what I saw out in the distance, not the aircraft that Indianapolis Center had called out to us. So I went right back to the object, and that's when I saw the object again. And I had noticed at that time that it only closed about half the distance it should have if it was something coming towards us. So I'm pretty used to, 1,000-knot closure, what something looked. And this was obviously either we were over quickly or it was stationary.
Okay, so you are cutting out a little bit, so I'm going to have you repeat some of that. But let's go back to what time of day was it, approximately?
It was 10:15, about 10:15 in the morning.
10:15 in the morning, okay. So about 10:15 in the morning, you're coming into Louisville, you're talking to Indianapolis Center, and they tell you that there's some traffic ahead of you, like 11 or 12 o'clock.
Correct. They almost always give you heads up when there's traffic in the area. 1,000 feet above us and converging, and about he called it our 12 o'clock, and that's when I looked at 12 o'clock and saw the object, which I had thought was the Airbus.
Okay, so what altitude are you flying as you're coming in to Louisville?
Well, I can't remember exactly the altitude on that day, but a pretty typical altitude for a low Dallas is going to be about 35,000 feet.
Okay, so let's approximate 35,000 feet. You're coming in. They're telling you have traffic about 1,000 feet above.
Correct, coming the opposite direction.
Opposite direction. And then you see something. Now, what do you see that you think is the traffic? Describe to us what that looks like, what the altitude, if you could estimate. What do you think you see?
Sure. So what I saw when they pointed out the traffic, I saw a very highly reflective surface. It looked like, the sun glinting off of the aircraft. And it looked like approximate that they called out. So I looked at 12 o'clock and saw it was slightly above us. I saw the glint, and I said, okay, traffic's in sight. And then we went back heads down, briefing our approach.
Okay, could you tell if it was any type of particular shape? Was it, cylindrical, spherical, anything like that?
No, it was just a highly reflective glint. I see something, shining off of an aircraft in front of you.
Okay, because it's
pretty
like
typical,
10, 20.
Right?
He
called it out. Right. He called it about 5 to 6 miles ahead of us. I can't remember exactly. Looked out, saw the glint, thought that was the aircraft, and went back to our briefing.
Okay. So you're just seeing something shining a light, and it's about, after 10 o'clock in the morning. So it's very probable that that's just some sort of reflection. For those who don't kind of know what goes on in the cockpit, a pilot, when you're approaching, doing your approach, you pull out charts. You got to plug in your the approach that they've designated for you. You have to, do all these settings. So it gets to be a really busy time, doesn't it?
Yeah, we have to do all of our calculations for landing data, look at weather, figure out which runway we're going to do, and then there's also an arrival to the airport. So we're just loading all that into the FMC to get ready for our approach.
Okay. So now you saw something, and then you said the Airbus, which they had pointed out to you, do see that fly over the top of your cockpit.
Correct. So what had happened
longer after?
It'd probably be between 45 and 30 seconds after we called the traffic in sight. It was when this Airbus did fly over. And it piqued my attention because what I saw was so far out in the distance. It was like 10 or 15 miles, not 5 or 6 or 7 like he originally called out. So then it made me look back to where I had saw what I originally thought traffic. And that's when I was like, okay, and how it only closed about half the distance it should have. What I thought was the Airbus was not the Airbus, because the Airbus just went right over us from more like an 11 o'clock position. So that's what brought me back to it. And now I'm seeing that object. And now it's a lot closer than it was previously. Now I can start to see ship, and I can tell it's much higher than it was when I originally saw it. So it's higher up on the horizon line.
I imagine it's probably hard to estimate, but like, could you guess like how much higher it was?
Well, at first, when I saw it out there, it looked approximately, like it should for an object, 1,000 feet above us. But by the time the Airbus did fly over, that wasn't it. Got over to this. Now I'm like, wow, this thing is much higher. This thing is 15, maybe 20,000 feet higher than us.
Which, if that estimate was correct, you're now looking at 50, 60,000 feet up.
Correct. And it was very different because, I was looking almost straight out the cockpit. Now when I looked up again, now I'm like 15 or 20 degrees tilting up, and it's still in front of us. So that's what gives me when you're flying for a long time, you kind of get an estimate of where your head goes and look for something at different altitudes. And this is much higher than us, and I'm starting to get shape. It's not just a glint. I'm starting to see something which is either egg or like spherical in shape.
So what are we going to see here in the video then? Jake, your first officer, grabs his camera. You're both trying to film it, and he's the only one that captures it, or did you have your phone recording too?
Yeah, I was trying to record it, but I was never able to get it to focus.
Okay, so he's got it. He's looking through the cockpit, and what do you see as it passes over?
Well, as we go underneath of it, it went from a very highly reflective, like silvery color, to almost ground color. It was almost as it was reflecting the ground.
Really?
That's how reflective it was. It was almost looking.
So when you say reflecting the ground, like did it look like it took on I don't want to put words in your mouth. What color are you seeing?
Well, it just looked like if you look outside the airplane, you look down, and it was, November, so it wasn't vibrant green. It was green and brown, and almost like it was just reflecting the fields underneath of it. If I had to guess what it was almost like an active camouflage that went opposite in polarity. Like if you were supposed to be looking from the top at the thing, it would be reflecting the ground, and underneath you'd be reflecting the sky. this was almost like it was an active kind of camouflage inverted. It's the best way I could say it, because looked like the ground above us.
And then both of you are saying, I mean, Jake tells you, yeah, that's not an aircraft. You're both in agreement. It's not an aircraft. You don't see appendages. You don't see anything that looks like it's propulsion related.
No, there was no, and I've seen weather balloons, which are a hot topic now, or spy balloons or whatever. And seeing those in the past, you can see the payload beneath them. You can see most of them are very teardrop shaped.
Okay, so I know people are dying to see this, and let's just go ahead and play it a couple times, and you kind of walk us through. So I can see there's some reflections inside the cockpit, up on the window a little bit, but the object is very clear here, and you zoom in a little bit, and look at that. I mean, it does look like it's not quite completely spherical. I mean, I don't know if I'm imagining it, but it looks like it's a little bit squished.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I really wish I could have spent more time looking at it. I mean, I saw it. It looked spherical, then it looked almost egg-shaped, and then that's pretty much, when it ended as we went underneath of it.
There is audio to this, but I've muted it because I don't want them to broadcast what the call sign was, because then you hear what airline it was, and we have to keep that anonymous because of the policy. So at any rate, the audio is muted, but you did, Brent, didn't you ask them if they had any traffic as you're seeing it, right, at high altitude? So what happens at that point?
Well, so right as we're going underneath of it during the video, I say, hey, this is whatever the call sign is. Do you guys have traffic, high altitude, 12 o'clock, just above us? No. And he goes, no, I don't have anything. Let me switch over to primary. So what happens is ATC's got two different kind of systems to use. They have their they have what they use for their transponders, and they have what's a prime, which is actual blips that they get every time the radar does a. So as soon as he switches to primary, he goes, hey, wait. And then he goes, all right, guys, contact center on blah, blah, blah. So he just ditched us. He did not. It was obvious because he had his mic keyed, and when he switched over, he goes, wait, what? And he goes, all right, you guys contact center on blah. He just ditched us.
So,
really?
So okay. You call it in, and you ask them if they've got traffic at high altitude, and he responds, and you can tell that his mic is still keyed up, as if he's like conferring or maybe talking to somebody, and then he's like quickly dismisses you and sends you to another frequency.
Right.
Wow. That is a little bit odd. I know that they get busy, and I know that he's got to hand you off and he's got stuff going on, but that is just kind of weird, because if it is a flight safety issue, I mean, let's talk about this, right? Let's suppose this is a weather balloon, and I'll get into that a little bit later. Let's suppose it's a weather balloon. What can happen if you fly into that?
It would be catastrophic if you hit. I mean, any part of it hitting an engine or a wing could, remove that from the aircraft. So yeah, it would definitely be, especially going 500 knots and you hit something, it would not be a good day.
It gets sucked up into your engine, right?
You're
down one engine, which is not a fun day at the office.
No, right. Well, we'd be down to 2 engines on the MD.
Oh, okay.
Now, the way the ATC handled that by passing, you off so abruptly and so quickly, because you had acknowledged that and they didn't take it even more serious, had something had happened, wouldn't that ATC controller have been responsible for that, since you had acknowledged that there was something there?
Right, but this was so far out of parameters for it had to have been, I'm guessing maybe 15 to 20,000 feet above us, so it wouldn't have been any kind of safety issue for us at that point because it was so much higher. I think he just didn't want to deal with having to do any paperwork of somebody saying, "Hey, I saw something." So,
yeah,
gotcha.
That's very possible. Yeah. So, before we let you go, and I really appreciate this because we'll play this video back here again. One of the things that struck me was if we're talking about distances and speeds. You're going, and we figured this out the other day, I think, Brent, but let's say, what was your best estimate of what speed you're going at this point?
Well, I mean, we'll just say 500 knots.
Okay, so 500 knots, thereabouts.
Well, if we say 480, then it makes easy math.
Okay, so 480 knots, which for some people, nautical miles, it's pretty similar to miles per hour, but it's slightly different. Now, if this is coming at you, or not coming at you, it's stationary, let's say, even. Okay, so the slowest closure rate that you could have. How many minutes from the time that you first saw this to when it passes over you, how many minutes would you say had passed?
Well, it's hard to really sit down, but I think when you and I talked about it, 45 seconds from when they called it out to when we figured out that that was not it. And then, so we'll just say the thing lasted 3 minutes.
Okay.
Now, I wasn't watching it the whole time, but let's just say the whole thing lasted 3 minutes. So that would mean that we went 8 miles a minute. So do the math easy on that. That's 24 miles.
8 miles a minute, so about 24 miles, it covers that gap. And assuming it's not moving towards you, it's just stationary. Okay, so if it were moving towards you, then, that closure and the illusion that it's zipping by is going to be much quicker. My opinion, now, I because we don't have a whole lot of info, from any, and there's no other, witnesses we know of. The video we could only kind of estimate and judge. That aside, my gut feeling to this is that if this was a 10-foot weather balloon, okay, and you zoom in on it and you're seeing it still relatively close in your frame, even being zoomed in though, it's going to look a lot faster as you're passing underneath it. It's like kind of taking a racing car on the highway and trying to read a street sign. It's like you're zipping by. It's just going to go by so fast. It's going to be, in my opinion, zipping by much quicker if it's only 10 foot. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think it was bigger than a regular sized weather balloon?
Yes, I'm just estimating, and it's hard to give, accurate, because there's really nothing to scale it off of. But just from my experience, I'm thinking this thing was about 30 foot in diameter and about 15 to 20,000 feet above us.
Okay. And we shall enter that into the record for your estimate. And I'm going to say, honestly, and I have nothing to base this on, so everyone, don't criticize me for this. It's just a gut feeling that we're not doing the math specifically and precisely on this, but I'm thinking it's possible this is much larger. And now we know that we have like these Chinese spy balloons that are 200 feet or so. I'm thinking this is much further away. You're estimating between maybe 50, 60,000 feet in altitude. If that's the case, that is not a 10-foot weather balloon. As slow as you're going under it, it's, to me, not even a 30-foot. I think you could be dealing with something even much larger. And that, if I do have a theory, I would say that it's possible it's something like the one that they just shot down, up to 200 feet or so, because of how slowly in relative position you're going under it. Now, having said all that, what do you think it is? You're telling me that it was oddly colored. It was really reflective. It seemed like it was sort of, squashed and maybe, what was the word you used? Not elliptical, but...
spherical to an egg shape,
Egg shaped. Okay. Yeah. So what are your feelings? Do you think it was a balloon of some sort or something else?
Well, just because I've seen, everything from small children's balloons, like flying out of Orlando, people lose stuff at Disney World, you know what I mean? And seeing this one I saw over the Mojave Desert back in 2005. I mean, that thing was 200 or 300 feet in diameter. It was a high lift. It had a ton payload under it. I know what they look like, and I know what it looks like when the sun's just coming up and hitting them. This thing was so reflective. It was not a balloon. I couldn't imagine, and I didn't see any of the payload of one of these, spy balloons or weather balloon. There was no payload underneath of it. It was just a highly reflective spherical object that we flew under.
Wow. That says a lot. And I agree with you. You typically see a payload if it's designed to carry something. You don't just fill up a 200-foot balloon and let it go. or whatever
Right.
size this was. So okay, well, Brent, as you know, like on our channel, we're really concerned that the focus, of a lot of what we do is about the concerns of aviation safety, and we've talked a little bit
Mhm.
about that. Is there anything you think that could change as far as the procedures and either reporting these things, or now that we're seeing the government is actually sending up jet fighters to shoot them down? Do you think we're headed in a good direction? Any opinion on that?
Well, it just depends on what they actually are. I mean, yeah, some of this stuff has been, I guess, they haven't really analyzed any of the wreckage to really say it's a Chinese weather balloon. The Chinese took, I guess, some responsibility for that. But what I saw was not a balloon, so I don't know really what it was.
So whoever's flying this, I mean, we didn't see what I'd call necessarily unconventional maneuvering and some of the other stuff, when people want to talk about otherworldly possibilities. But do you think that it's possible we're dealing with a foreign adversary that's developed some sort of like UAP for surveillance or something like that? I mean, do you have any opinion on what you think it could be?
Well, anything that I'm going to say is going to be um, none of it's going to be based on anything that I know for sure. But what I did see was something that didn't really have any characteristics of normal flight. It couldn't see any propulsion unit, so that would kind of lend some people to believe, well, then it's a balloon. It's just hovering there. But it's beyond. If it's not a balloon, and I really don't, it's beyond what I think anything could. That we do know about now could sustain flight. It would have to have some kind of anti-gravity or some way to stay in this position. Oh, I don't know what that could be.
Well, and I appreciate that, because a lot of people, not necessarily pilots, but a lot of people come out and just start choosing sides, right? And
Right.
that
Yeah.
conversation is always like, oh, it's otherworldly, it's ET. And in our channel, I tell people all the time, look, I don't care what it turns out to be. I'm just curious. And either way,
Right.
we're talking about an aviation safety hazard of flight issue here, right?
Right.
And the fact also that we have this really heavy stigma, because out of respect for your employer, we've decided not to mention them, because I get it. I understand that they don't want anyone speaking in behalf of them. But there are some other employers who say, I don't even care if you mention who you fly for. Don't even talk about this stuff, which I think is ridiculous.
Right.
You know? So we really appreciate you coming here today to speak with us. Hopefully, as people are watching this, that we do get some more information, coming out, and we'll let you go. And then, Brittany here will wrap up, and thank you for your time.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you. All right. That was pretty amazing. I love that people feel comfortable coming forward to us and telling us these things, because, as we just said, the stigma is still very real. I know we're like cheering. We're like, yeah, the stigma is being broken. And then all of a sudden I hear a story of someone being called in, the chief flight officer's office, and being threatened with their job again. Right. So I'm glad Brent was able to talk to us. We're able to keep that anonymity, with his airline. But having heard, what he said, I agree. There are some strange things. So, I mean, I feel the same too. That I want to say it looks like a balloon, and I'm going to say that. I feel it's balloon-like. You take his testimony. He brings up some great points, that there's no payload. So, okay, still could be a rogue balloon of some sort, but it's the size. It's the size thing that I'm saying. I don't think it's your 10-foot standard weather balloon. And I've launched a few of those in my day, quite honestly. I even shot one down with a 50 caliber machine gun as part of our TV show. But I feel like it's a size problem that as it's passing over, like I had mentioned, it would have gone a lot quicker if we're dealing with a smaller object. So then you hear Brent say it looked like it was egg-shaped. And could that be just kind of illusion that he's looking from the angle? Or could it be something like these new objects that... What were they telling us? This latest one that was shot down was octagonal?
Yep. They were saying one was octagonal, the other one was like a cylinder base shape. And then based off of Brent basically explaining what he saw, I mean, he was saying it looked almost egg shaped. So, you know, at this point we have to be open-minded to the idea that there could be some new technology, even from an adversary. Sure. They're testing new things, no matter the size. And like you had mentioned, there's two takeaways from his, observation of this. And there was the fact that there was no payload, no strings, nothing teardrop hanging underneath it, nothing at all. And then also the camouflage aspect. You know, that's a little alarming. What type of advanced technologies are dabbling in a camouflage technology that is so reflectant that it can reflect into the sky to where people maybe aren't able to see it? Imagine if the thing was in the cloud. You wouldn't see it that reflectant. So, you know, those are some issues that I would see for anybody as a pilot, even as yourself as a pilot. I mean, if you think about that, if those are traveling between 20 to 50,000 feet, that is still a window of where a lot of our air traffic is coming through. And as he mentioned too, it'd be catastrophic if they hit something like that.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we take into account his testimony, and I'm sure Jake was, what I didn't mention, Jake did not want to be on camera, but he's given us permission to use his video, that he's the one who shot that. We thank him for that. But we have the two witnesses there, and I don't know if there's anyone else out there. I mean, if there is, this again was November 14th, 2019. If anyone else had seen this or something similar to it, we'd love to hear from you. Because that aspect of him believing that it might have had some sort of technology, you know, camouflage, it could have been an illusion from what he saw, or it could have been actual technology. We all know that many people have reported such things. Whatever it is, it shouldn't be there, in my opinion, because you could suck that thing up into your engine, something had happened, and the other aspect is national security. So we're trying to stay on this, everyone, and we thank you for your time. And you know, please keep sending us videos and reports such as this. And please don't just dismiss things when you first hear about them because you think in your brain, you know, you've solved everything. Because whether it's us or the government, you know, trying to gather information, the information comes from a lot of different sources and at different times. And so you're trying to put this puzzle together. And just stay curious about it, yes, but I think we need to withhold making conclusions. And yes, most things are prosaic. They have explanations and earthly explanations, and we're fine with that. We're totally fine with that. It helps us eliminate the things that we can identify now. But in this particular case, if it comes from a foreign adversary, that also is important. Okay?
Absolutely.
Not everything is extraterrestrial or alien or anything otherworldly. It's not what we're saying here. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll be in touch if there's anything else that comes forward.